All right. So for our random topic, number two here for this one, I wanted to talk about bodybuilding, specifically my love of bodybuilding. And what I have around me are a bunch of different trophies, medals, a sword that I've happened to. Well, maybe I want to word that differently. That I worked for, and that I've been awarded competing on stage. Right, so I've competed in a number of different bodybuilding competitions. I was in the men's physique division, and this is, I guess, the fruit of the that labor there, right? And I wanted to kind of go into it a little bit. Now, first and foremost, let me just say, this is not a flex. I'm gonna say, look at me and all my stuff and all my trophies, and I just keep winning. I can't stop winning. That's not the case, right? It's not. This is not a. I mean, it's a little bit of a flex, but it's not really a flex, right? This was actually suggested to me as something that I should do and just put out there because there's a story behind all of this stuff. Of course, I wouldn't be saying it if there wasn't a story. And so we got to go back to the beginning of the story a little bit, tiny bit, right? I explained before how I started off lifting and why I started off lifting and why I needed, why I thought I needed strength. But one of those things that occurrences that happened around that time when I first started lifting was, well, listen, I was 115, 120 pounds soaking wet, about 12% body fat or something like that. And then, people were probably thinking of that like, oh, that's amazing, right? But that's not what, for a dude, that's not that great. Let's just put it that way. That for a guy who wants to be strong and who was about to undertake the challenge of fatherhood, that wasn't the best. At least it wasn't in my eyes. And so I start, doing all this lifting and stuff, and I'm doing all these things, and come to find out within like a year, I put on, talk about newbie gains. I put on about 40 pounds of lean muscle tissue and still maintain the same body fat percentage. See, the thing about that is, I don't know if you noticed, but like I have really, really, really like skinny wrist. I am a prototypical hard gainer, which also says that my metabolism is on some type of drug, just by itself on some type of drug, and it basically is just I have a really fast burning metabolism essentially, and so it was always hard for me to put on weight, let alone 40 pounds of lean muscle tissue. And I was actually training people around that time too. That's when I was really starting to bud as a personal trainer. And a couple associates, a couple friends, just started asking like, hey, even a couple clients at that point started to ask, well, why don't you go do a show? And I knew nothing about it. But there were a couple other associates that were pretty cool, and they were in like the circuit or whatever. They were doing shows, and they kind of showed me the ropes a little bit. And I was like, just go try it and see how you like it. Well, I get there and I do a show and I absolutely fall in love with it. But I didn't even just fall in love with it. I actually fell in love with the process. And I know how cliche that is, love the process, trust the process, right? But I really did fall in love with the process. And I think that's what kind of branched out into everything else. Like I love working out. I love working out in a way that leads to lean muscle tissue. Like I love bodybuilding. I love it. I love doing it. It doesn't bother me. The soreness that happens afterwards, love it. Like I just love every aspect of it, right? Well, not every, and I'll talk about what parts I don't love about bodybuilding, but it doesn't really have anything to do with bodybuilding itself. So bodybuilding, I see it as an art form more than I see it as a science, because once you get your body to a certain point, you have to present it, and you have to present it to people, it's a what I like to call a muscle pageant. So mostly everything is subjective, right? So it's just like depending on how this particular judge feels that day, but even more so depending on what that judge likes and doesn't like, right? That's what it comes down to. And there's a group of judges, and they all kind of confer, and they all agree at some point in time towards the end of the show, like who's the best, right? But it's still one of those things where I just love the art form. I love the art form because I've always been intrigued with how our bodies work, but I always been intrigued with how they look, like the muscles and how they overlap each other. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I kind of marvel at the creation that God made, right? Like the human body is a wonderful, wonderful thing, I think. So outside of that, I also, like I said, I fell in love with the process, love the process. And in that process, you kind of figure out how, I guess the main thing for me was I was looking to achieve mastery over my body. And I don't know if I ever really reached like full mastery. I think I'm pretty close though, right? I mean, there's still, of course, some things that, will just go no matter what. But I kind of know how to manipulate certain things to get my body to respond a certain way. Of course, as I get older, those things change a little bit, but I'm kind of keeping up with the changes. So, that's as close to mastery, I think, as I'm going to get. But it intrigued me in terms of, if I wanted to grow a muscle, not all the muscles, like let's just say I just wanted to grow my shoulders, I could, right? And this is how, boom, 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 right? Or if I wanted just to grow my VMO or the teardrop in my quads, just that, I could, right? If I wanted to isolate and I wanted to feel out a certain part of maybe my upper pec as opposed to my lower pec during exercise, I could. And so I think that's where the mastery comes in, right? That's kind of what I mean by mastery. I can move it in any way that I want. I can connect to whatever muscle I want, and I can grow whatever muscle I want. Now that's not without struggle, of course, right? That's not without, countless failures, but I think what really continued to drive me forward in bodybuilding was just that, where it's just like I'm seeking to achieve mastery, and that was really it. I admire the art form. I love the art form. I see it as more of an art form than a science, and then I wanted to achieve mastery. So that's what kept me going into it. That's what really got me into it. That's what keeps me going in it. And all this stuff that I have set up around me is kind of like the results of me seeking those things, right? And the shows are a different thing. They're different. They're a different beast, because then it's just like it comes down to presentation now, right? Again, another art form, not necessarily a science. And it's I love it. I love it. But there's a large part of bodybuilding that gives me the freedom to just do, right? I want to connect to this muscle. I'm going to connect to this muscle. I want to feel it out more, or I want to be able to activate my lat better or whatever. Funny story, when I was in the middle of doing, like right at the peak, right in the middle of doing shows, and I was practicing posing, and all of a sudden I just could not feel my left lat. Like I couldn't feel it. And when you can't feel it, sometimes you can't really work it as well. So I had to go through a whole process of just feeling the lat again, like to a point where I was doing exercises that forced me to kind of like almost tighten it up so much that it was going to cramp. But I had to do that repeatedly because I could not feel my left cramp or my left lat for the life of me. I don't know. That's why I stumbled on it. Left lat for the life of me. But I couldn't feel it. I don't know why I just lost feeling, but that's what it was. So I really fell into bodybuilding because of those reasons, right? And there's a couple stories that came with it. Like the experience that I gained through the training, the people that I've met through the shows, it's been great. It's been great. Now, here's the thing, right? So there's a downside to bodybuilding that I don't like so much. So like, here's the thing. I went into bodybuilding determining that I was going to be a natural bodybuilder, meaning I was going to be completely unassisted. There's no steroids, no juicing, basically, right? And I stuck with that, right? Throughout my entire bodybuilding career, if you want to call it that. Again, amateur career, never made it to the pros. I never took anything, never, and it's funny because around that time I'm like, based on my genetics and in my actual muscle, structure and the way that everything kind of comes together, there's a good chance I could have been cleaning up. Would have been this is something that was actually told to me a number of times too. I'm not so sure whether these particular people were trying to get me to start juicing, whether they were trying to be my supplier. But it was told to me a number of times, and I actually kind of can see it too, based on just certain things, certain items that if I did pack on an additional 40 pounds of lean muscle tissue on top of that, oh man, I would have probably made even more of a killing than this. And so, but that's never been an option for me. Never been an option. And I'll never forget this one conversation I had so the one time I decided to actually go for a coach, because the majority of this was uncoached. It was me learning and me just going from there. But I hired a coach because I wanted to get my posing down, and I wanted a few pointers along the way. And it was actually before I went to my first national show, because you go to a national show, you do well there, you get your pro card, right? And I wanted nothing more than to be a pro, even though I didn't think I was going to make any noise in the pro circuit, right? I just wanted to get there. That was my goal. If I could get there completely natural, oh, that says something, because there's less people who are natural in the big leagues. And that's a different topic, different day. Probably going to be more on the injectable side, right? Again, I talked about Ozempic earlier. Now I'm talking about, steroids on this end. So there might be a whole injectables episode where it's just like, yeah. But anyway, I will never forget this conversation I had with him, with my coach at the time. And I asked him, because I was considering it at one point, like, hey, do you think I should take something? Like, do you think I should go on some gear? And he asked me, I'll never forget it. And he asked me, he was just like flat out like, well, do you have kids? Yes. Yeah, I do. And then he was flat out, don't do it. And that was one of the most, I don't know how to explain it, I guess, right? Like, now I'm at a loss for words, but it was one of the most prominent conversations I think I've had with somebody within the circuit, right? And then he goes on to explain a couple things to me about like how, he started it and what his mindset was going into it, why he started doing that stuff. And yeah, and so he advised me not to. And I appreciate him for that, for sure, because there was definitely some rising pressure, because mind you, I was getting these things. I was getting the trophies. I was getting the awards. And almost every conversation after that was just like, man, you look good. Now, with a couple extra pounds of lean muscle tissue, oh, you're easy pro. And I always thought that was code, and come to find out it was code. And so, that's part of the I guess that's part of what I didn't necessarily like, or what I still don't like about bodybuilding, because you have these guys having massive heart attacks and dying at 40. And I'm 40. So it's just, oh man. So I couldn't do it, and still can't do it. Right. And at some point in time, I guess I had to let go of the idea of ever making it to the pros, but maybe I don't, there's some things in the mix, some things in the works where it's just like, maybe someday I'll make another run. We'll see. But that's the kind of like the downside of the whole bodybuilding thing to me. But it was never enough. It was never enough to take away from my actual love of the art form itself, right? And again, I will double down and focus on the art form before I focus on any other noise any day. It's a definite art form, and there's so many stories that came from me bodybuilding. There's so many things, so many life lessons. I'll remember another story, and I'll give, and this will be it, because this segment can go on forever, right? So this last story, I was actually in my first national show, and I didn't know what to expect or anything like that, but I knew everybody up in there they were bringing the heat. They were bringing it. Like they was ready. I thought I was ready too. And I get set up, get on stage and everything. I present well. Everything was good. Everything, like, I did my normal thing, and it was probably one of the best looks I've ever had. And I came in 5th. And I was just like, ooh. Now here's a funny thing, right? I know like a lot of people, they thought about this, and anytime I tell them the story, and there's actually this metal back here. Anytime I tell them the story about this medal, and it's just like, it's not just a medal, it's not just an award, it's a perspective shift for me. This going to Pittsburgh and going to the Teen Collegiate Masters championships, nationals, right? That changed my perspective on so many things outside of bodybuilding. And it was just, yeah. So I do all my stuff, I get all my prep done, and then I come in 5th. And I remember grabbing the medal, holding it, and I'm just like, I'm in 5th place, so I didn't get my pro card, right? And I deserved to be in 5th, though. Don't get me wrong. Like, some of the dudes that were ahead of me, they were some heaters. They brought there is nothing. I mean, like, it was ridiculous, right? I thought I was coming up in there with some bubbly shoulders. No, those cats had some bubbly shoulders. But again, I get in there and I get my medal, and I'm disappointed, and I'm texting my coach, and I'm just like, yeah, man. And he flat out was just like, it goes like that sometimes. And he kind of left it at that. And I think I know why he left it at that, because it's just like, he's been through it. He's been through it. He's been through multiple times where it's just like, I should have did this, should have, blah, 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 blah. It didn't matter at the end of the day, right? And I think that was his point. And you just got to get back on the horse and try again. And I looked, but I wasn't hearing that at the time. And I was just like, all right, well, whatever. I'm grabbing my medal, and I remember distinctly, I'm going back to the staging area, right? Not the staging area, but like the where the competitors kind of rest and get ready before going to the staging area. And I remember going back to it and taking the medal and just wrapping it up and just kind of throwing it in my bag. And then I sit down, disappointed. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this one guy, and I heard him first before I actually saw him. And I was just like, and he was crying. And I'm just like, why is this dude crying? Like, he's a grown man sitting here crying. Like, and his coach was there with him, and he was just like, hey man, no, you gotta keep it together. And the guy, I'll never forget it. He was just like, I don't know how many more runs I have left in me. I can't do this again. And I looked, and the dude, he had no medals. He had nothing. He didn't get any call outs. He didn't place. There was nothing there for him. And I looked at that guy, and I was just like, and I mean, here's a dude, you know, he put in the work. He looked good. You know, he put in the work, but he was absolutely devastated because he didn't get something that I had in my possession, and I just threw it in a bag like it meant nothing. Talk about perspective. Eesh. So I go out, I get my bag, and I'm like, all right, well, okay, no, you gotta act right now. So now get my bag, get the medal, put that thing on, put it around my neck, and I'm just like, I got this. I did this. I worked hard to do this, and there's plenty of other people who have worked hard, just as hard or harder, and didn't get that. So I better be proud of what happened here today. And it just changed everything for me. And it made me look at life a little bit differently too. Not the fact that it was a grown man sitting there crying over a competition, right? A competition with a medal, right? Like it was the fact that somebody gave their all for something and came up just short, and I didn't appreciate that very same thing that I ended up getting. And, it was a spoiled attitude that I had. And it was kind of an arrogant one too. And so then I took that, wore the medal, and was proud. And then everybody I told it was just like, hey, yeah, I got fifth. National show, fifth place? Yes. Yeah. That's really good. And I'm just like, oh, right. And it just changes a little bit. So, bodybuilding, not only do I love it, do I love the art form, not only has it helped me kind of connect to my body and obtain some level of mastery over my body, but it has also taught me a lot. It's also taught me a lot of different life lessons, a lot of different things, I guess, about life. And I take these lessons and I apply them to things outside of the lifting world, outside of working out, right? And that's part of what has been built into the SCAL method, right? It's these life lessons. It's these shifts in perspective that have allowed me to kind of see the big picture overall. And that's what leads into, or that's what's led me to the SCAL method. Okay. So that's why I'm going over my love of bodybuilding. It's another historical piece, I guess, right? Another part, another little nuanced event and occurrence that led into the say cheese and lift method.